"A company this size needs a man's grip, not a girl's daydream," my father, Lowell, declared. His voice was as cold as ice. He sat at the head of the mahogany boardroom table, looking at me with total disappointment. He slowly slid my heavy set of office keys across the polished wood toward my brother, Thorn. I stood there, frozen in place. My heart felt like it had been punched. I looked down at the gold plaque on the desk, the one I had earned through 10 years of 80-hour weeks. I had built this place. I had sacrificed everything for sterling logistics, and now I was being tossed aside like a piece of trash. Thorn didn't even have the decency to look me in the eye. He just reached out, snatched the keys, and let out a mean little smirk. "Don't worry, sis," he said, his voice dripping with fake kindness. "I'll send you a gift card for your little startup once I take this company global. Maybe you can buy yourself some nicer clothes." The entire board of directors, men I had personally mentored, men whose careers I had saved, started snickering. They looked at me like I was a stranger. My father stood up and pointed his finger toward the heavy oak doors. "You're a sterling by blood, Phoenix, but you've become a liability by gender. The shareholders want a leader, not a secretary with a title. Hand over your keycard and leave." I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I reached into my pocket, placed my card on the table, and walked out with my head held high. But as the elevator doors closed, I felt a secret surge of power. They thought they had taken everything. They didn't know that the proprietary software they used to run every single truck and ship was actually leased from a shell company I owned personally. They just fired their landlord. My name is Phoenix, and for the last decade, I was the true engine of Sterling Logistics. People saw the name Sterling and thought of my father's legacy, but I was the one who actually kept the lights on. While my brother, Thorn, was busy partying in Ibiza and spending company money on luxury yachts, I was in the office until midnight. I was the one who saved the company from 3 separate bankruptcies that Thorn's investments had caused. I knew every driver, every route, and every line of code in our system. I was the architect of our empire, but in my father's eyes, I was just a placeholder until the heir grew up. Even my mother, Eulalie, was part of the problem. She used to come into my office and tell me to be a good sister. She told me I should hand over my patents and my software designs to Thorn just to help him look the part of a CEO. She said it didn't look right for a woman to be the brains behind the operation. She wanted me to shrink so that my brother could feel big. She didn't care about the company's health. She only cared about family appearances. She wanted Thorn to have the crown, even if he didn't know how to wear it. But I wasn't as foolish as they thought. When Thorn took over, he demanded I sign over my tech rights. I didn't hand over the patents like a sheep. Instead, I handed him a very long legal document that looked like a transfer of ownership. In reality, it was a high-priced, ironclad software subscription with a tiny clause. It said that the license could be revoked at any time for unprofessional conduct. Thorn was so eager to see me leave that he didn't even bother to read the fine print before signing his name in bold, messy ink. 3 months into Thorn's leadership, the cracks started to show. I was sitting in my new, modest office at my startup when my phone buzzed. It was Albin, the family's oldest and most loyal accountant. His voice was shaking, and he was whispering as if he were hiding in a closet. "Phoenix, it's a disaster," he breathed. "Thorn has drained the entire emergency reserve. He didn't use it for the warehouse repairs or the driver bonuses. He bought a fleet of private jets. Thorn wanted branding, but all he was doing was burning through the cash I had worked so hard to save." Albin told me that the company was bleeding money faster than a punctured tire. Thorn was flying his friends all over the world, staying in 5-star hotels, and telling the board that it was all part of a new era of luxury logistics. The company's bills were piling up, and the vendors were starting to get restless. Albin sounded like he was on the verge of a heart attack. He begged me to come back and talk some sense into my father, but I knew Lowell wouldn't listen. To him, Thorn could do no wrong because he was the son he always wanted. Then Albin dropped the biggest bomb of all. Thorn had secretly sold the historic Sterling family estate, the house where we grew up, to a mystery buyer. He needed the cash to cover his massive gambling debts from a trip to Vegas. He thought he could sell the house and rent it back without my father ever finding out. My heart raced, but not for the reasons Albin thought. I let out a long breath and leaned back in my chair. What Albin didn't realize was that I was that mystery buyer. I had used my software profits to buy my childhood home, right out from under my brother's nose. A few weeks later, I decided to attend a major tech conference. I wanted to see how my brother was handling himself in public. Thorne arrived with a huge entourage, looking like a movie star instead of a businessman. By his side was Fallon, his newest girlfriend. He had given her a job as the VP of marketing, even though her only experience was posting selfies on social media. They looked arrogant and untouchable. I stood in the back of the crowded hall, wearing a simple suit, watching them bask in the camera flashes. Thorne took the stage and grabbed the microphone. He didn't just talk about his success. He decided to take a shot at me. When I took over Sterling Logistics, it was a mess, he lied to the crowd of reporters. My sister, Phoenix, was fired for gross incompetence. She nearly ran this company into the ground with her tiny, feminine ideas. But today, under my masculine vision, we are thriving. We are the future. Fallon stood behind him, nodding and smiling like she had actually done something to help. I felt a wave of anger, but I channeled it into a single tap on my smartphone. I had set a timer for my software's latest security update. Seconds after Thorne finished his insulting speech, the giant screens behind him went pitch black. Then, red error messages started flashing across the room. All over the world, every Sterling truck stopped moving because their GPS systems locked up. Every shipping container was stuck in port. My software's update had just locked Thorne out of the entire global system because he hadn't paid the subscription fee from the company's empty accounts. The masculine vision he bragged about was suddenly blind, and the world was watching him fail in real time. Fallout was immediate. The company's stock began to fall like a stone in a well. My mother, Eulalie, called me 10 times that evening. When I finally answered, she was crying hysterically. "Phoenix, you have to do something. The family name is being dragged through the mud on every news channel," she wailed. She invited me to dinner at a fancy restaurant, claiming she wanted to make things right and that she missed her daughter. I knew better than to trust her, but I wanted to see how far they were willing to go. I arrived at the restaurant to find Eulalie sitting with a man I despised, a sleazy, high-priced lawyer named Soren. He was known for making people's problems disappear using dirty tricks. It wasn't a family dinner, it was a trap. Before the appetizers even arrived, Soren leaned across the table with a predatory smile. "Phoenix, we know you're behind the software glitch," he said. "We can make this very difficult for you. We have ways of tying you up in court for years." Eulalie nodded eagerly, her eyes red from crying. "Just give Thorne permanent access, honey, for the family." Soren tried to blackmail me, saying they would tell the press I had hacked the company if I didn't sign a new contract giving Thorne total control over my software for free. He pushed a pen toward me, his eyes cold and threatening. I looked at my mother, hoping for a glimmer of regret, but all I saw was desperation to save her precious son. I pushed the pen back and stood up. "I didn't hack anything, Soren. I simply stopped providing a service that hasn't been paid for. If you want to sue me, go ahead. But tell Thorne to start looking for a new job because his current one is about to disappear." After I refused to give in, things got ugly. My new independent firm, Phoenix Rising, was suddenly hit with a series of fake health and safety inspections. Every day, a different city official was at my door, trying to find a reason to shut me down. They claimed my wiring was bad or my fire exits were too narrow. It was obvious someone was paying them to harass me. I did some digging and found out that Thorne had hired a shady fixer named Riven to sabotage my business. He wanted to crush me so I would have no choice but to crawl back. But Thorne's plan had one giant loophole. Riven was actually my cousin's ex-husband. He had been a part of our family for years before a messy divorce, and he hated Thorne even more than I did. Riven didn't want to hurt me. He wanted to get paid by a fool. He had been taking Thorne's money and then calling me to tell me exactly what the plan was. "Your brother is a moron, Phoenix," Riven told me over the phone. "He thinks he's being a mastermind, but he's leaving a paper trail a mile wide." Riven started sending me copies of every check and wire transfer Thorne had used to pay him for the illegal services. Thorne was using the last of the company's dwindling cash to pay for criminal harassment against his own sister. I took those copies and put them in a safe deposit box. I wasn't going to use them yet. I wanted Thorne to keep digging his own grave. Every time an inspector showed up at my office, I was ready for them with a smile and perfect paperwork. Thorne was spending thousands to annoy me, while I was building a mountain of evidence that would eventually put him in a prison cell. The disaster at Sterling Logistics reached a breaking point when the bank finally stepped in. The regional manager, a very strict man named Kellen, called a meeting at the Sterling headquarters. He notified the board that their credit line was officially frozen. They had missed 3 major loan payments because Thorne had spent the money on his jets and Fallen's marketing campaigns. Thorne panicked. He tried to call my father, Lowell, for help, but our father was currently in a high-end medical facility. Lowell had suffered a stress-related breakdown when he saw the stock price plummet. Thorne went to the facility to beg Lowell for his personal signatures to unlock more funds, but the doctors wouldn't let him in. Thorne was furious, screaming at the nurses that he was the CEO. What Thorne didn't know was that the medical facility had recently contacted me. They told me that the company's health insurance had lapsed because Thorne forgot to renew the policy. They were going to move our father to a state-run hospital if the bills weren't paid immediately. Thorne didn't care about our father's health. He only cared about his signature. I was the one quietly paying for Lowell's medical bills out of my own pocket. I made sure he had the best care, the best room, and the best doctors. I didn't do it because I had forgiven him for firing me. I did it because I wanted him to be healthy enough to witness the total destruction of the legacy he had tried so hard to protect. I wanted him to see exactly what his son had done to the company I had built. While Thorne was outside the hospital doors shouting at security, I was inside, making sure my father stayed alive just long enough to see his world crumble. As Sterling Logistics began to fall apart, a rival firm made their move. The company was owned by a man named Imric, a brilliant and tough businessman who had been our biggest competitor for years. Imric made a hostile lowball offer to buy the company for pennies on the dollar. He knew Thorne was desperate and that the banks were closing in. If Thorne didn't sell, the company would go into total liquidation and everyone would lose their jobs. Thorne was terrified. He knew that if he sold to Imric, he would be remembered as the man who lost the family empire. Thorne called me, his voice trembling with fear. He didn't demand anything this time, he begged. "Phoenix, please," he whimpered. "Use your little connections, talk to Imric, tell him to back off. We can give you your old job back. You can be my assistant again." He actually thought I would help him save his skin just for a chance to work for him. He didn't realize that I was done being anyone's assistant. I told him I would see what I could do, but I didn't promise him anything. I let him hang up the phone thinking there was still a chance. The truth was much more satisfying. Imric wasn't just a rival. He was my secret business partner. We had been meeting in private since the day I was fired. We had been planning this takeover for months. I was the one who told Imric exactly when to strike and exactly how much Thorne's debt was worth. We weren't just buying a company, we were reclaiming it. Thorne was so focused on his own ego that he never imagined his useless sister would team up with his biggest enemy. We were the wolves at the door, and Thorne was the one who had left it unlocked. Despite the chaos at the office, the city's biggest annual charity gala went on as planned. It was the event of the year, where all the important people gathered to show off their wealth. Thorne attended, trying to pretend that Sterling Logistics was still a powerhouse. He wore a tuxedo that cost more than a small car and walked around with Fallen on his arm. He spotted me in the crowd and decided to try one last public humiliation. He gathered a group of wealthy socialites and pointed at me. "Look, everyone," he laughed. "My sister Phoenix is here. I think she's the seat filler for the night. How sad." The group laughed, looking at my simple black dress with pity. Thorne was feeling confident again, telling everyone that the software glitch was just a minor bug that he had fixed personally. He was spinning lies faster than a top. I just stood there, sipping my water and waiting. I knew what the main event of the evening was. The gala was set to honor the Entrepreneur of the Year, an award that my father had won 3 times. Thorne was convinced he was going to win it this year because of his bold new direction. The lights dimmed, and the presenter took the stage. Thorne smoothed his hair and stood up, ready to walk toward the podium. And the winner for Entrepreneur of the Year for her incredible growth with Phoenix Rising and her revolutionary new logistics platform is Phoenix Sterling. The room erupted in applause. Thorne's jaw literally hit the floor. He stood there frozen as I walked past him toward the stage. I didn't look at him, but I could feel his rage. When I got to the mic, I thanked my team and said, "True success isn't given, it's built. And what is built on ego always falls." The gala win was the final blow to Thorne's reputation. Investors started pulling out, and the company's office was a ghost town. But Thorne's problems were even deeper than I thought. I discovered that he hadn't just spent the company's money and taken bank loans. He had gone to a loan shark named Corin. Corin was a dangerous man who didn't care about credit scores or court orders. He wanted his money back, and he wanted it now. Thorne had used the company's physical warehouse as collateral for a high-interest loan to pay off his gambling debts. One morning, I drove past the Sterling headquarters and saw a group of tough-looking men standing at the front gates. They weren't employees. Corin himself was there, leaning against a black SUV, looking at the building like he already owned it. Thorne was inside, hiding in his office with the curtains closed. Corin wasn't interested in a repayment plan. He had realized that the company was going bankrupt, and he wanted to seize the warehouse before the banks could get to it. Thorne had literally gambled away the roof over the drivers' heads. I watched from across the street as Thorne, VP of Marketing, Fallon, tried to leave the building. Corin's men blocked her car, and she started screaming. Thorne was too cowardly to come down and help her. He was trapped in his glass tower, realizing that his masculine vision had led him straight into the hands of criminals. I knew it was only a matter of time before the whole thing exploded. Thorne had brought a monster to the family's doorstep, and he had no idea how to make it leave. The Sterling name was now associated with debt and danger. With the walls closing in, my mother, Eulalie, realized that the ship was truly sinking. She showed up at my penthouse late one night, looking haggard and desperate. She didn't try to play the good mother this time. She sat on my sofa and looked at me with cold, hard eyes. "I know you have money, Phoenix," she said. "I need $1 million, right now. I'm leaving the country before the collectors come for the house and the cars." She was ready to abandon her son and her husband just to save her own skin. I looked at her, feeling a deep sense of pity. "And why should I give you a dime, Mother? You were the one who told me to hand everything to Thorne. You were the one who watched him fire me and laughed." Eulalie didn't flinch. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, silver flash drive. "Because I have Thorne's illegal double books. I have records of every penny he stole, every bribe he paid, and every law he broke. Give me the $1 million and this is yours. You can use it to put him away forever." I took the drive, my heart pounding. I knew what was on it would be the final nail in Thorne's coffin, but I wasn't going to let her walk away that easily. I told her I would wire the money to a neutral account once I verified the data. She nodded, grabbed her coat, and left without saying goodbye. She was a survivor, just like the rest of the Sterlings, but she had no loyalty to anything but her own comfort. As soon as the door closed, I plugged the drive into my laptop. I was ready to see the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I spent the rest of the night going through the files on the flash drive. It was worse than I could have imagined. Thorne hadn't just been incompetent, he had been a criminal from day one. He had been stealing from the employee pension fund to pay for his private jets. But as I scrolled deeper, I found a folder that made my blood run cold. It was a recorded video from the night before I was fired. The camera was hidden in the corner of my father's study. I watched as Lowell, Thorne, and my mother sat around the desk, drinking expensive scotch. In the video, my father was laughing. "Phoenix thinks she's the one in charge," Lowell said, his voice mocking. "She built a great engine, but she needs to learn her place. We'll let her keep working until the merger is ready, then we'll dump her. A girl shouldn't have that much power. It's better for the family if people think Thorne is the genius." My mother nodded, sipping her drink. "She'll be hurt, but she'll get over it. She's a good girl. She'll do what we tell her." They had planned the whole thing. It wasn't just a business decision. It was a betrayal of my soul. I sat in the dark, watching the video over and over. My father hadn't just fired me. He had actively worked to break my spirit, so I would be a submissive, good girl for the rest of my life. He knew Thorne was a fool, but he preferred a foolish son over a brilliant daughter. The pain was like a sharp knife in my chest, but it also burned away the last of my guilt. I didn't owe them anything, not a single cent. I was no longer the good girl they had planned for. I was the person who was going to take everything they had left. The next morning, the situation at the Sterling headquarters turned into a full-blown crisis. Corin and his loan sharks had finally had enough. They forced their way into the building and locked Thorne out of his own executive office. They were literally sitting in his chair, putting their boots on his mahogany desk. Thorne was standing in the hallway, surrounded by a few remaining, terrified employees. He looked like a frightened child. He was sobbing into his phone, calling me over and over. When I finally answered, he sounded like he was drowning. "Phoenix, help me, they're here, they're taking the building," he cried. "I'm sorry for everything, I'll give it all back, just call the police, call him Rick, do something." He was begging for mercy from the sister he had mocked and humiliated. He kept repeating that blood is thicker than water and that we had to stick together as Sterlings. He thought the family name was a shield that would protect him from the consequences of his own greed. He really believed that I would save him just because we shared the same parents. I listened to him cry for a moment, then I spoke with a voice as cold as a winter morning. "Water is much easier to wash off than the dirt you threw on me, Thorne," I said. "You didn't care about blood when you shredded my pension files. You didn't care about blood when you left our father to rot in a hospital without insurance. You made your bed with these people, and now you have to sleep in it." I didn't wait for his response. I simply hung up and blocked his number. I watched the news feed as the Sterling sign was torn off the front of the building by Corin's men. Thorne, in a final act of desperation, tried to sue me. He hired a new lawyer and filed a massive lawsuit for corporate sabotage. He claimed that my software update was a criminal act designed to destroy his company. He went on the news and called me a vindictive sister who was trying to ruin her family out of spite. He thought he could use the law to force me to give him my code. He even tried to get a court order to freeze my startup's bank accounts. He was fighting like a cornered rat, throwing everything he had at me. We met in a sterile legal conference room for the initial hearing. Thorne sat across from me, looking smug as if his lawyers had already won. He whispered, "You're going to jail, Phoenix. You can't just turn off the company's brain." Then my lawyer, Bennett, stood up. Bennett was the best in the business, and he looked at Thorne with pure boredom. He didn't argue about sabotage. He simply pulled out the original contract Thorne had signed on his first day as CEO, the one Thorne hadn't bothered to read. Bennett pointed to the subscription and usage clause. "Mr. Sterling, this contract explicitly states that the software license is a temporary lease, not a purchase," Bennett explained. "It also states that the owner, my client, has the right to revoke access at any time for unprofessional conduct, which includes failure to pay the monthly fees. You are 6 months behind on payments. My client didn't sabotage you. She simply stopped providing a service you didn't pay for." The room went silent. Thorne's lawyer looked at the document, his face turning pale. Thorne's legal counterstrike had just turned into a massive admission of breach of contract. While Thorne was falling apart, another shadow appeared from my past. I wasn't married, but I had been in a long-term relationship with a man named Bram. We were supposed to be engaged, but he had suddenly broken up with me right after I was fired. Now his mother, Clarabelle, showed up at my office. Clarabelle was a woman who lived for status and wealth. She looked at my new office with a sneer. "You should have just been a good wife to my son, Phoenix," she said. "Instead, you've become this person." Bram is much better off with his new fiancée. She's much simpler and knows how to listen. I realized then that Clarabelle had been the one who encouraged Thorne to fire me. She wanted me to be a simple housewife so Bram could control my money and my influence. She had seen me as a threat to her son's ego. I looked at her, and for the first time I saw how pathetic she was. "Is that so, Clarabelle? And how is Bram's simple life going? Is he enjoying the tax shelter he built inside Thorne's company? Because I've seen the records." Clarabelle froze, her hand gripping her designer purse so hard her knuckles turned white. I pulled out a document from my desk. I found out that Bram has been using Sterling Logistics as a place to hide his own failing investments. He's been moving money through Thorne's accounts to avoid paying taxes. When Thorne goes down, and he is going down, the authorities are going to find Bram's name all over those files. Your son isn't a success, Clarabelle. He's a fraud who hitched his wagon to a falling star. Clarabelle didn't say another word. She turned and practically ran out of the office. She had come to mock me, but she left knowing her own son was headed for ruin. Thorne's last hope was a merger with a massive global tech giant. He thought that if a bigger company bought him, his debts and crimes would be swallowed up. He spent weeks courting the CEO of the giant firm, a man named Caius. Caius was a man of immense integrity and was known for only doing business with honest people. Thorne put on his best suit and lied through his teeth, telling Caius that the company's problems were just temporary software issues and that everything would be fixed soon. He was desperate for a lifeline. I knew Caius personally. He was one of the few people in the industry I truly respected. I had worked with him on a few projects years ago. I didn't have to lie to him. I just had to tell him the truth. I sent Caius a secure file containing the double books and the evidence of the software lease. I didn't tell him what to do. I just wanted him to have all the facts before he signed a deal with a snake. I knew Caius would do the right thing because his reputation was more important to him than a cheap acquisition. The following day, Thorne sat in his office, waiting for the merger announcement to be made live on a major business news channel. He had even invited a few reporters to watch his comeback. When Caius appeared on the screen, Thorne was beaming. But Caius didn't announce a merger. He looked directly into the camera and said, "We have decided to withdraw our offer for Sterling Logistics. After a thorough review, we found evidence of massive fraud and ethical violations. Sterling Logistics is a sinking ship of ego, and we will not be a part of it." Thorne's face crumpled on live television as the reporters in the room started shouting questions. Exactly 6 months after the day I was fired, the inevitable happened. Sterling Logistics officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The news was everywhere. Thorne was being investigated by the SEC for fraud, and the company's assets were being frozen. The Sterling empire was officially over. I was sitting in my garden, finally feeling a sense of peace when my phone rang. It was the hospital. My father, Lowell, was being released, but he had nowhere to go. Thorne hadn't even bothered to pick him up. Lowell sounded old and broken on the phone. "Phoenix, please," he croaked. "Come pick me up. I'm at the hospital entrance. We need to go home. We need to save the legacy. I've realized my mistake. You're the only one who can fix this. We'll build it back together just like before." He was finally admitting he needed me, but it was too late. He still talked about the legacy as if it were a holy thing, and he still thought he could tell me what to do. He wanted me to be his good girl and clean up the mess his masculine vision had created. I drove to the hospital and saw him standing by the curb with a single small suitcase. I rolled down the window, but I didn't get out. "I already have a home, Lowell," I said, my voice steady. "And the Sterling legacy died the day you handed Thorne the keys and told me a girl couldn't lead. You didn't care about the legacy then. You only cared about your own pride. I'm not going back to save a ghost." I handed him the address of a modest apartment I had rented for him. "You can stay here. It's paid for a year, but don't call me about the company again. That world is gone." A few days later, the final blow came for the rest of the family. The Sterling family mansion, the place where my mother had lived for 30 years, went up for a public auction. Because of Thorne's massive debts and the bankruptcy, everything had to be sold. I drove to the house and saw a crowd of people on the front lawn. Eulalie was there, standing on the grass in her silk robe, screaming at the bailiffs as they carried out her expensive paintings and statues. She looked like a madwoman, clinging to a gold-framed mirror as if it were a life raft. She spotted my car and ran toward me, her face red and tear-streaked. "Phoenix, tell them they can't take my things," she shrieked, banging on my window. "This is my home. You have to pay them off. You have all that software money. Save your mother." She was still demanding, even at the very end. She didn't ask how I was. She just wanted me to be her checkbook. She didn't care that her son's greed had caused all of this. She just wanted her beautiful things back. I stepped out of the car, carrying a small cardboard box. I walked past her and handed the box to the head bailiff. Then I turned to my mother. "The new owner wants you off the property by sunset, Mother," I said calmly. Eulalie froze, her eyes wide. "New owner? Who would buy this place in such a scandal?" I looked at the house, the place where they had planned to break my spirit. "I bought it, Mother. I'm the mystery buyer Thorne sold the estate to months ago. I'm not saving you, I'm evicting you. You can take this box for your personal items. The rest belongs to the company's creditors." Thorne, now a desperate fugitive from his own failures, tried one last, stupid move. He thought that if he could just get the source code for my software, he could sell it on the black market and flee the country with a fortune. He knew I kept a backup server in my private office at Phoenix Rising. One night, he broke into the building, thinking he could bypass the security. He had spent years thinking I was just a girl. so he assumed my security would be weak and easy to beat. He was wrong about everything. He barely made it into the lobby before the alarms went off. He tried to run for the stairs, but he was pinned against the wall by my security head, Rafferty. Rafferty was a massive, quiet man who had worked for Sterling Logistics for 20 years until Thorne fired him. Thorne had fired Rafferty during a meeting because Rafferty had looked at him wrong when Thorne was making a mistake. Now, Rafferty held Thorne by the collar, his eyes cold and unforgiving. Thorne was trembling, his expensive suit torn and covered in dust. I walked into the lobby and looked at my brother. He looked pathetic. "Rafferty, you can let him go," I said. Rafferty stepped back and Thorne slumped to the floor. "You don't get it, Phoenix," Thorne hissed. "That code belongs to the family, it's Sterling property." I looked down at him. "Nothing belongs to the family anymore, Thorne, you saw to that. And Rafferty, he's the man you fired for having more integrity than you. He's the one who caught you. You're not a genius, Thorne. You're just a common thief who wasn't even good at stealing." I watched as the police led him away in handcuffs. The final act of Sterling Logistics took place in a crowded courtroom during the ultimate shareholders meeting. I attended not as an employee or a family member, but as the company's majority creditor. I had bought up almost all of the company's debt from the banks and the loan sharks. I was the one who held their lives in my hands. The remaining board members, including a man named Edris who had snickered the loudest when I was fired, were literally on their knees. They begged me to reinvest and save the jobs of the 1,000 people who still worked there. Edris looked like he was about to cry. "Phoenix, please, we were wrong. We should have listened to you. You can be the CEO again. We'll give you whatever you want. Just don't let the company die. Think of the legacy." They were using the same words my father had used, trying to appeal to my sense of good girl loyalty. They thought that because I had built the company, I would be too emotional to let it go. They thought my feminine heart would make me soft and easy to manipulate one last time. I stood at the front of the room, looking at the men who had betrayed me. "I'm not here to save the company, Edris," I said, my voice echoing in the silent room. "I'm here to announce its total liquidation. Sterling Logistics is dead. I'm only buying the physical assets I want, the trucks, the warehouses, and the equipment. I'm not buying the name, and I'm definitely not buying any of you. You're all fired, effective immediately." I watched as their faces turned pale. I wasn't being cruel, I was being firm. I was a business owner now, and I had no room for people who valued ego over excellence. After the liquidation, Thorne tried to play the victim one last time. He released a public apology video on social media. He sat in a dark room, wearing a plain hoodie, looking at the camera with watery eyes. He talked about mental health struggles and the crushing pressure of being a young CEO. He blamed his advisors and claimed he was just a kid who made some mistakes. He even cried a little, saying he missed his sister and hoped she could find it in her heart to forgive him. The video started to go viral, and some people actually started to feel sorry for him. I wasn't going to let him control the narrative with a lie. I had one last piece of evidence from the flash drive my mother had given me. I released a video of my own. It wasn't me talking. It was security footage from the Sterling office on the day Thorne took over. The video showed Thorne and Fallon laughing as they went through the HR files. Thorne was gleefully shredding the pension files of the long-term employees, saying, "These old people don't need this money. I need a new jet. Let them work until they're 90. Public reaction was instant and violent. The sad kid, image Thorne had tried to build, was shattered in an instant. People saw him for exactly what he was, a cruel, greedy predator who had stolen from the very people who had built the company. The comments section was a sea of rage. His mental health excuse was laughed at. He had to delete all his social media accounts within an hour. He had tried to use the internet to save his reputation, but he ended up burning it to the ground. He was now the most hated man in the city, and he had no one to blame but himself. Then there was Bram, my almost fiancé. He had lost everything when the tax shelter he built inside Thorne's company collapsed. The IRS had seized his bank accounts and his luxury cars. He was penniless and alone, as Clarabelle had abandoned him the moment he became a liability. He showed up at my office late one afternoon, looking desperate and disheveled. He tried to walk past the receptionist, but Rafferty blocked his path. Bram shouted my name, until I finally agreed to see him for 2 minutes. He walked into my office and tried to look at me with the old love in his eyes. "Phoenix, baby, I made a huge mistake," he started, his voice cracking. My mother got in my head. She told me you were too much to handle. I never stopped loving you. I was just scared of how powerful you were. We can start over. I don't care about the money. I just want you back. He was trying to crawl back now that I was the one with the power. He thought I was still the same girl who had waited for him to propose. I didn't even stand up from my desk. I simply turned my laptop screen around to show him a photo. It was a picture of me and my business partner, Imric, laughing at a dinner the night before. My life is full, Bram, I said, and there's no room in it for a man who only loves me when I'm small. Your reservation in my life expired the day you chose your mother's ego over our future. Rafferty will show you out. Bram stood there for a moment, realized there was no good girl left to manipulate, and walked out with his head down. He was a ghost from a past I had finally outgrown. My father, Lowell, was finally released from the hospital and had to move into the modest apartment I had rented for him. It was a clean, quiet place, but it was a far cry from the Sterling mansion. I visited him once to bring him some of his personal books. He sat in a small armchair, looking out the window at a brick wall. He looked small and fragile. "Why are you being so cruel, Phoenix?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm your father. I built that name for you. You should be grateful. You've taken everything from us." He still didn't get it. He still thought he was the hero of the story. I pulled out my tablet and played the video from chapter 12, the one where he and Thorne laughed about breaking my spirit because I was just a girl. I let it play until the very end, then I turned it off. The room was silent. Lowell's face was pale, and he wouldn't look me in the eye. He finally realized that I had heard every single word of his betrayal. He realized that his good girl had been watching him the whole time. "You didn't build that name for me, Lowell," I said. "You built it for your own ego, and you were willing to destroy me to keep it. I'm not being cruel, I'm giving you exactly what you earned. You have a roof over your head and food in your kitchen. That's more than you gave the employees whose pensions Thorne stole. You wanted me to learn my place. Well, this is it. I'm at the top, and you're exactly where you put yourself." I walked out of the apartment, leaving him alone with his silence. It was the last time I ever spoke to him. With the old company liquidated, I officially launched my new empire, Sterling Winslow Logistics. I used my mother's maiden name to show that the old Sterling was gone. It was 100% owned by me. I didn't need a board of snickering men or a father's approval. I had the best software, the best equipment, and most importantly, the best people. I didn't just buy the assets of the old company. I went out of my way to find every single employee that Thorne had fired or mistreated over the last 6 months. I held a massive meeting in one of the new warehouses. Thousands of drivers, mechanics, and clerks were there. Many of them were crying as I spoke. "You were the heart of this company, and you were treated like trash," I told them. "That ends today. You all have your jobs back with full back pay for the time you were gone." The room erupted in a roar of cheers that shook the walls, but I wasn't done. "And because I believe in true partnership, every one of you is being given a 5% stake in the new company. We are all owners now." The energy in the room was unlike anything I had ever felt at the old Sterling. It wasn't based on fear or ego. It was based on respect and shared success. We weren't just a logistics company. We were a family that actually worked. Imric stood by my side, nodding in approval. We had built something better from the ashes of the old world. I looked out at the faces of the people I had saved, and I realized that this was my true legacy. Not a name on a building, but the lives of the people who made it work. I had finally built my own dream come true. A few weeks later, I was sitting in my brand new office on the top floor of a skyscraper. The view was incredible. I could see the entire city and the port where our ships were moving like clockwork. My business was thriving, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly at peace. A delivery guy walked into my office, carrying a large bag of takeout I had ordered for my team. He was wearing a faded, stained uniform and a hat pulled low over his eyes. He looked tired and defeated. His shoulders slumped as he walked toward my desk. As he set the bag down, he looked up and our eyes met. It was Thorne. My brother was working for a food delivery app just to pay for his mounting legal fees. He didn't recognize me at first because the office was so grand and I was silhouetted by the sun. When I spoke, his whole body froze. "Just put it on the table, Thorne," I said. He looked at me, his mouth hanging open in shock. He looked at the luxury of my office, the high-tech screens, and the gold Sterling Winslow logo on the wall. He looked like he wanted to cry or scream, but he was too broken to do either. I reached into my purse and pulled out a single penny. I placed it on the desk. "Here's your tip, Thorne," I said, my voice calm and clear. "A girl's daydream just became your reality. I hope you enjoy the walk out. I hear the stairs are great for low-level people." Thorne didn't say a word. He just picked up the penny, turned, and walked out of the office he could never have built. I watched him go, then I looked back at the skyline. The Sterling Winslow sign lit up the night, a bright beacon of justice in a world that finally knew my name.